And welcome into a Wednesday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good morning to you. We start off the program this morning with breaking news out of the 4th U.S. Circuit, and to get an update on the high-stakes race for the North Carolina Supreme Court, Republican Jefferson Griffin, Democrat Allison Riggs, Mitch Kokai with the John Locke Foundation joins us this morning. Mitch, we got some breaking news right around 5 o'clock or so last night. What are the details that you're tracking this morning?
The most significant piece of this news, Nick, is that it helps resolve some of this unusual situation of the state court and the federal court dealing with this issue at the same time. The 4th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals basically denied the request from the State Board of Elections and from Democrat Allison Riggs to move this election dispute back from state court to federal court. A federal judge had the case, sent it to the state Supreme Court, State Board of Elections and Riggs appealed that decision, but the 4th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals said, no, much of what you're calling for is now moot because the state Supreme Court decided to reject a request from Jefferson Griffin and send the case back to a trial judge. And the part of it that's not moot, we're not going to force the federal trial judge to call the case back. He will have to keep jurisdiction over some federal issues that might be lingering in the case. But for now, all of the action that's going to be remaining in this case is going to take place in state court. And a state court hearing is scheduled on Friday. So that's the most significant piece of this, that we're not going to see the state court and the federal court dealing with the same issues at the same time and perhaps issuing confusing and conflicting rulings. The 4th Circuit says, no, we agree that the federal trial judge was within his rights to send this case back to state court. And that means that all eyes should be focusing, if they're focusing on this debate, on what happens in Wake County Superior Court, starting with the hearing on Friday. And then obviously, whatever ruling comes out of that, we could expect some appeals. Those appeals will probably take place through the state courts, including potentially up to, once again, another appearance before the state Supreme Court. But the feds would only get involved if someone thinks that there is a federal issue involved that requires another appeal. At this point, though, the feds have kind of washed their hands of this and said, state Supreme Court or state Superior Court, deal with what you need to do. We're not going to touch this case.
Mitch, you mentioned this term, and it was mentioned in the legal brief, moot. That was something that Griffin's team made in multiple venues and avenues. That was really their main argument about not punting this back up to federal court. Suffice to say that the justices in the 4th Circuit agreed with the arguments made by Griffin's attorneys?
Yeah, they definitely did on the case of, there are 2 different appeals that were in front of the 4th Circuit Court of Appeals, and they basically addressed all of them with this one order. One deals with the actual ballot challenges themselves. That case is sitting in Superior Court, and basically the 4th Circuit says, okay, Chief District Judge Myers, the trial judge at the federal level, you still have some jurisdiction over the federal issues in those cases, but you don't have to deal with them now. The only thing you would have to deal with is anything that remains on a federal level once the state court issues are resolved. But then there was a separate case that dealt with a request that Jefferson Griffin had filed directly with the state Supreme Court asking for a writ of prohibition against the State Board of Elections, blocking it from certifying Democrat Allison Riggs as the winner in this election. Now, right after the Judge Myers sent this case back to the state Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court then issued a temporary stay, and a couple weeks later rejected the request from Jefferson Griffin for a writ of prohibition. And what Griffin's lawyers had said was, as soon as the state Supreme Court rejected that request for the writ of prohibition, this case became moot. And basically the argument on the other side from the State Board of Elections and from Riggs was, well, it's not really moot because even though the court rejected the call for the writ of prohibition, there is still this stay that's blocking the State Board of Elections from acting. And if the case goes back to federal court, then Judge Myers could decide whether the stay remains in effect. Remember, the stay is important because as soon as this election is certified, any legal action that Griffin has is moot in and of itself. It's done. Once the election is certified, Riggs would be the winner. Griffin can't have any more federal complaints. So the stay remains in effect. And by the Fourth Circuit agreeing that the writ of prohibition action was moot, that's going to have no impact from the federal courts on the stay. The stay is going to remain in effect until the state Supreme Court decides to get rid of it. But that means that Griffin can continue with this legal challenge until the state Supreme Court decides that no, the stay is going to go away.
And folks can read more on this decision yesterday in our story over at carolinajournal.com. Mitch, you mentioned a legal proceeding that's going to be happening in Wake County on Friday. What are we expecting to hear from that? What exactly is going to be the questions asked coming up a little bit later on this week?
There are 3 different lawsuits that are all going to be put together in one setting. And the 3 lawsuits deal with the 3 different particular types of ballot challenges that Jefferson Griffin has. One deals with, officially, it's about 267 people who voted who never lived in North Carolina. But if you've seen some court filings from Jefferson Griffin, we actually had a story at carolinajournal.com about this. In a footnote in that filing, he says, well, actually, it looks like the number is more than 500 voters and maybe even more because dozens of counties haven't reported how many voters may have cast ballots this way. But officially, it's 267 voters who have never lived in North Carolina but cast ballots here. Then there's another 5,500 voters who are overseas voters who voted without providing photo ID. That's the second challenge. And then the largest category, more than 60,000 voters, are voters who registered to vote without apparently providing either a driver's license number or last 4 digits of the Social Security number. All 3 of those categories are 3 different lawsuits that will be before a Wake County trial judge who will decide whether these ballot challenges have merit. Basically, the State Board of Elections rejected all 3 of those challenges, sometimes on party line votes, and now a Superior Court judge will decide whether those ballot challenges have any merit to them. If the Superior Court judge agrees with Griffin, that would be appealed, I'm sure, by the State Board of Elections. If, as is likely to be the case, the Superior Court judge rejects the requests from Griffin, then Griffin would appeal up to the North Carolina Court of Appeals or maybe try to bypass the Court of Appeals and go straight to the state Supreme Court. Eventually, it looks like the state Supreme Court would have some sort of ruling one way or another on these election challenges. And then potentially the case goes back to federal court to deal with some federal issues. But for now, all of this action is going to take place in Superior Court. There's a hearing Friday. There's no deadline, although the Supreme Court has asked the Wake County Superior Court to proceed expeditiously, which means we shouldn't have to wait too long for a ruling after that hearing on Friday. And then you'll see some appeals. And eventually this case probably gets back to the state Supreme Court for action one way or another. And then maybe another trip to federal court, depending on what the state Supreme Court does. If the court rules in favor of the State Board of Elections and Riggs, then probably the federal court case would be done because Griffin's not going to take this to federal court. But if the state Supreme Court rules in a way that favors Griffin in some way or another, you might see the State Board of Elections try to kick it back up to federal court and say, wait a minute, federal law goes against what the state Supreme Court said.
Mitch, thanks for walking us through this over the last couple of weeks. We'll be keeping an eye on this hearing in Wake County on Friday. Mitch Kokai from the John Locke Foundation joins us this morning on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Where it's now 5:14, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. It's time to get a look at traffic on this Wednesday morning. An update with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you.
It's 5:20. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. We are streaming live this morning on our Carolina Journal YouTube channel. You can also listen to the show 24/7 by checking out our podcast. It's available wherever you get your shows. Just search for the Carolina Journal News Hour, tap that subscribe or follow button, and take the show with you on demand on your own time. It's the Carolina Journal News Hour podcast. Download and subscribe now. Well, buckle up, North Carolina vehicle owners, because the cost of your auto insurance may be going up by over 20% later this year. This is according to a press release from the North Carolina Insurance Commissioner in Mike Causey. Insurance companies in the Tar Heel State have requested a statewide average increase of 22.6% in automobile insurance rates. The North Carolina Rate Bureau, which represents the state automobile insurance companies and is not part of the North Carolina Department of Insurance, filed the request with the department on Monday. The insurance companies requested that the rates take effect as early as October the 1st of this year. State law gives the Commissioner of Insurance, who is Mike Causey, 60 days to review the rate request to determine if the increase is justified based on data submitted by the North Carolina Rate Bureau. If Causey does not agree with the requested increase, he and the department can negotiate a settlement or call for a hearing. If a settlement cannot be reached, the case goes to a hearing, and a hearing officer would make a ruling on the request. North Carolina Rate Bureau Chief Operating Officer Jared Chappell said in an emailed statement to Carolina Journal last night, quote, "This request reflects the fact that vehicles and repairs are getting more expensive, partially because automakers pack so much technology into modern vehicles. Accidents have become more common, partly because distracted driving has eroded driving habits. Vehicle weights are up, and so is horsepower, both of which make accidents more severe. North Carolina has some of the lowest auto rates in the country, and this increase is needed to ensure a large number of companies want to write policies in this state." End quote there from the chief operating officer over at the North Carolina Rate Bureau. Now, you are aware that this rate filing follows a February 2023 request by the North Carolina Rate Bureau in which insurance companies requested a 28.5% increase for auto insurance rates. There was a settlement reached by the Department of Insurance, resulting in only a 4.5% increase in 2023 and in 2024, with motorcycle rates increasing about 2.5% this year. And for individuals struggling with the rate of insurance, well, we covered this last month. We've got news that homeowners insurance rates are going to increase on an average of 15% statewide over the next 2 years. That's going to be, depending on the zip code, the area of the state in which you live, that rate is going to fluctuate, but a statewide average of 15%. Now, that was much lower than the more than 42% that was requested by the North Carolina Rate Bureau. Mike Causey said his office and the Rate Bureau signed an agreement that will see that standard home insurance increase by 7.5% June 1st of this year and 7.5% June 1st of next year. That request was made in January of 2024. So with that, there could be a hearing sometime later this year. Similar timelines may be expected concerning this major request in auto insurance rate increases as the North Carolina Department of Insurance works through the public comment period and negotiates with the Rate Bureau before a final decision is made. The newest updated rates and all of those details can be found on our website this morning. It's over at carolinajournal.com. Teresa Opeka has the story in the headline, Rate Bureau requests 20+% increase on NC auto insurance. We'll keep a close eye on that right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Well, state lawmakers will be back in Raleigh today, in just a couple of days after Governor Josh Stein requested $1 billion in aid for Western North Carolina, hurricane relief aid for Helene. Well, lawmakers could be proposing to spend about half. State lawmakers are considering and will be considering later on today whether to spend another $500 million on Hurricane Helene relief for Western North Carolina. Republican lawmakers who will debate the proposal around 2 o'clock this afternoon revealed their plans in a legislative document Tuesday afternoon, just one day after Democrat Governor Stein called for more than $1 billion in what he says is, quote, immediate, end quote, Helene aid for the state government. Democrats and Republicans have disagreed on exactly how much money the state government should spend, as well as on which recovery needs to be prioritized. However, there is bipartisan and pretty broad bipartisan consensus and support that more money needs to be allocated. Helene did an estimated $60 billion worth of damage in western North Carolina. That is several times more than any other hurricane in the state's history, in any sort of modern history. The federal government is expected to lead the recovery efforts, with the state filling in the gaps here and there. The additional $500 million relief bill that is scheduled to be taken up Wednesday by the House of Representatives' new Select Committee on Hurricane Helene Recovery was filed Tuesday by the GOP committee's two chairmen, Representative John Bell and Representative Dudley Green. The initial version of House Bill 47, that's the relief bill, gave no indication on how the $500 million is to be split up. That debate will likely take place today at 2 o'clock when that meeting starts. And the bill title also indicates that more funding could be discussed in the future, as it's named the Disaster Recovery Act of 2025, Part 1. So what we're expecting to see here is the General Assembly has already allocated roughly $1 billion in relief from the storm. However, not all of that money has been spent as of right now. Hundreds of millions of dollars remain unspent several months after the storm hit. It hit in September. We're talking about 6 months ago at this point. Republican State Treasurer Brad Briner's office announced yesterday that his office is nearly ready to start approving state-funded loans for city and county governments in western North Carolina that continue to deal with cash flow issues from the storm. That loan program has $100 million to hand out, and Briner said that the loan applications could be beginning to be approved by potentially as soon as late February, so within the next couple of weeks. So in Raleigh today, we're expecting the General Assembly to be back. Josh Stein is asking for $1.1 billion. That includes $100 million for local farmers to clean their fields of debris, $75 million to repair private roads and bridges, $30 million to rebuild downtown areas and business districts, $25 million for local residents for mortgage and rent assistance, and some other money. The General Assembly is, at least their starting point, is $500 million. We'll be tracking that coverage throughout the afternoon over at CarolinaJournal.com. And, of course, we'll bring you the updates as soon as we get them right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour, where it's now 5:28. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. We'll get another look at traffic on this Wednesday morning with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thanks.
It's 5:35. You're listening to the Carolina Journal News Hour on News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good Wednesday morning to you. Recapping our big breaking news this morning, the 4th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals has rejected the North Carolina State Board of Elections and Democrat Allison Riggs' request to move a dispute over the recent Supreme Court election back to federal court. This means that a state order remains in place blocking the certification of Allison Riggs as the winner over Republican Jefferson Griffin, who is challenging over 65,000 ballots as he and his legal team call it, quote, unlawful. A Wake County Superior Court judge is set to hold a hearing coming up on Friday to address Griffin's challenges. The election board and Riggs oppose his claims, and the 4th Circuit ruling upholds U.S. Chief District Judge Richard Myers' decision to send the case back to state court, though it modifies his reasoning. The appellate judges agreed Myers should retain jurisdiction over federal issues while the state court resolves the issues of state law. The decision allows state court proceedings, including potential appeals, to continue before any federal intervention could take place. If federal issues arise, the case could be returned to the courtroom of Judge Richard Myers. The ruling clears the way for Friday's hearing, where the state court will begin addressing the various Griffin ballot challenges that we talked about with Mitch Kokai a little bit earlier this morning. So, as it stands right now, the federal appeals in the high-stakes race for the North Carolina Supreme Court, they are said and done with, and now we move into a situation where it's going to be in front of a superior courtroom in Wake County on Friday. We'll be tracking that throughout the day, and hopefully we'll get details as soon as we get them out of the courtroom in Wake County coming up on Friday. Turning to some other news this morning, Duke Health and UNC Health filed articles of incorporation with the state following their September announcement last year that the two institutions would partner to bring NC Children's, a nonprofit organization, to the Research Triangle area. The partnership promises to bring a 500-bed children's hospital, children's outpatient care center, and a children's behavioral health center to the state of North Carolina, specifically the Triangle area this morning, with an estimated price tag of $2 billion. North Carolina Senate President Pro Temp Phil Berger, who leads the North Carolina Senate, said during the announcement, quote, North Carolina is home to incredible medical schools, incredible research hubs, yet we do not have a freestanding children's hospital. We are the largest state population-wise that does not have such a hospital, and we are a growing state. We just passed 11 million people, and we're poised to continue to see that growth as we go forward. But that's one of the reasons that this is such an exciting project as far as I'm concerned. This campus, through its construction and operation, will create thousands of jobs and be amongst the largest economic development projects in the history of the state of North Carolina. This is a win for the economy and a win for our children's health and for our state's infrastructure. For a decade, both institutions have aimed at bringing a freestanding children's hospital to North Carolina. The hospital would be the first of its kind in the state, serving as a flagship hospital comparably, clinically and academically, to top children's hospitals in the country. Moreover, an adolescent hospital would also be housed within it, according to the announcement, which, as I mentioned, took place in September of last year. According to Governor Josh Stein, he said during the event, quote, today's announcement between UNC Health and Duke Health to create the North Carolina's Children's Hospital will end up saving lives in countless children for generations to come. It will also help shape the economic environment and development for the future of our state. In the 2023 budget, almost $320 million was appropriated for the project. That's according to the Joint Conference Committee report on Current Appropriations Act of 2023. A mouthful there, $320 million being allocated. The governor continued in his statement saying, quote, the need is real. North Carolina is the most populous state in this nation that does not have a freestanding independent children's hospital. There isn't one between Atlanta and Washington, D.C. This hospital will generate billions of dollars in economic activity in North Carolina. The partnership between the two health systems will enable their clinical teams to enhance and expand existing pediatric programs and research efforts, according to a press release that was put together. Both groups will establish a leading destination for top pediatric subspecialties, researchers, residents, and fellows. According to a Wake County commissioner who spoke to Carolina Journal, they said, quote, "It's exciting to see two of our region's healthcare leaders come together to build a brand new hospital focused exclusively on serving the youth. This specialized center will help meet with the increased demand for medical treatment and behavioral health sciences for children from within our community and across the country." That's Wake County Commissioner Thomas speaking to Carolina Journal. Now, this is a great announcement, but there is going to be some time before it gets underway. Construction on the project is set to begin in 2027, and it will take an estimated 6 years to complete. The hospital is anticipated to open in the early 2030s. However, the Children's Behavioral Health Hospital, as well as the surgery center and or medical office building, may open several years earlier. Because they are building a full complex, they're expecting it to take about 6 years for complete construction, noting that various parts could open quicker than other areas. Dr. Craig Albstein, who is the CEO of Duke University Health System, said, quote, "As a former practicing pediatrician, I cannot express to you how grateful I am to be in this partnership that will shape the way that we continue to care for the youngest members of our communities for generations to come, which is why we are delighted that Duke Health and UNC Health have joined forces to create North Carolina Children's, which will be the official name of the hospital." Some great pictures and some more quotes and comments available this morning on our website. That's over at carolinajournal.com. Again, Duke and UNC Health bringing a $2 billion children's hospital to the Triangle region. It will be the first in the state and the largest facility between Washington, D.C. and Atlanta. We'll keep an eye on it in the months and years to come. You can read additional details by visiting our website, carolinajournal.com, where it's now 5:43. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. It's time to get another look at traffic this morning with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thanks, Nick.
Good morning again. It's 5:50. You're listening to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Don't forget that you can take the show with you on demand by checking out the Carolina Journal News Hour podcast. It's available wherever you get your shows. Just search for it, tap the subscribe and follow button, and listen on demand on your own time. It's the Carolina Journal News Hour podcast. Download and subscribe now. Well, just a couple of weeks ago, we brought you news that homeowners insurance rates across the state of North Carolina will increase on an average of 15% over the next 2 years. An agreement that was signed between the insurance commissioner, Mike Causey, and the North Carolina Rate Bureau, which is an independent group that serves insurance providers in the state, signed an agreement that would cause homeowners rates to increase by 7.5%. Again, this is on average on June the 1st of this year, and another 7.5% on average June the 1st of next year, 2026. And if that's not enough for you, we're getting details this morning about your vehicle insurance rates. Those could be going up by over 20% later this year. According to a Tuesday press release from the North Carolina Insurance Commissioner, insurance companies in the Tar Heel State have requested a statewide increase average of 22.6% for car insurance rates, or automobile insurance rates, more accurately to say. The North Carolina Rate Bureau, which does represent those statewide insurance companies and is not part of the Department of Insurance, filed the request with the department on Monday. The insurance companies requested that the rate take effect October the 1st of this year. Now, state law does give the Commissioner of Insurance, Mike Causey, 60 days to review the rate request to determine if the increase is justified based on data that is submitted alongside it. If Causey does not agree with the requested increase, he and the department can negotiate a settlement or call for a hearing. If a settlement cannot be reached, the case goes to a hearing, and a hearing officer would make a ruling on the request and determine what that rate would be. North Carolina Rate Bureau Chief Operating Officer Jared Chappell said in an email to Carolina Journal, quote, "This request reflects the fact that vehicles and repairs are getting more expensive." Also noting that has to do with so much modern technology. Accidents have become more common, particularly because of distracted driving has eroded driving habits. Vehicle weights are up, and so is horsepower, both of which makes accidents more severe. He noted that North Carolina has some of the lowest auto rates in the country and said, quote, "An increase is needed to ensure a large number of companies want to write policies in the state." This rate filing follows a February 2023 request from the Rate Bureau and auto insurance companies in which they requested a 28.5% increase. However, a settlement was reached with the Department of Insurance when resulting in an increase of only 4.5% in 2023 and 2024. And so we'll see what comes of this increase that they are requesting now. You can read more details on this story. Plus, there is a public comment period that will be opening in which you can voice your concerns or comments on this 22.6% average increase over on our website, carolinajournal.com. The headline story, Rate Bureau requests 20+% increase on North Carolina auto insurance. You can read that at carolinajournal.com. As we recapped our big breaking story this morning, the 4th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals will not make any decisions and will not require a race for a legal challenge over the North Carolina Supreme Court race and some 65,000 ballots to return to federal court. We are learning this morning that 7 left-leaning activist groups and 26 individual voters have filed court documents opposing Jefferson Griffin's attempt to block the counting of those 65,000 ballots in the election. Griffin trails Democrat Allison Riggs by 734 votes and claims that some of those 65,000 ballots are unlawful. The state Supreme Court has temporarily halted the certification of Riggs as the winner, and a Wake County judge will hear Griffin's challenge, as we've been talking about, coming up on Friday. The activist groups argue that Griffin's efforts would retroactively change election rules and disenfranchise lawful voters. The State Board of Elections and Riggs contends that Griffin's claims violates legal principles preventing post-election rule changes. They also argue that the disputed ballots, including those cast by military and overseas voters, were counted in accordance with long-standing laws across the state. Griffin's challenges focuses on three groups of ballots, over 500 voters he claims never lived in North Carolina, or for the matter of fact, the United States as a whole. More than 5,500 overseas ballots allegedly lacking a photo identification, and more than 60,000 ballots from voters that he said, and his team rather, say have incomplete registration. He argues that the election board unlawfully counted these votes, affecting the race's outcome. So while we learned that the Fourth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals did not decide to send that case back to a federal court, we await the ruling, or we await the hearing, rather, in Wake County on Friday that will be taking place there. As of right now, the case sits solely in the state of North Carolina. And as we talked earlier this morning with Mitch Kokai from the John Locke Foundation, seemingly no matter what the outcome in this Wake County Superior courtroom is, there will likely be more sets of appeals by the side that is not successful in convincing a Wake County Superior Court judge to rule in their favor. That could set up the process for this to go to the North Carolina Court of Appeals and then potentially back to the North Carolina Supreme Court. So as we sit here just a couple of days into February, it seems like we still have at least a little bit more time in this race, and we'll continue to track those details right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Expecting some movement in the General Assembly this afternoon on more Hurricane Helene relief and recovery. Could be over $500 million. We'll have those details coming up for you tomorrow morning. That's going to do it for a Wednesday edition. WBT News is next, followed by Good Morning BT. We're back with you tomorrow morning, 5 to 6 a.m. right here on News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT.